Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Paul.
And I'm Mark.
So you're finally back with us.
Yeah.
Back from Massachusetts.
Yeah. Back from spending Christmas with your sister there. Yeah, it was a good trip.
Yeah, that sucks going to Massachusetts.
Yeah, it's always good to be back on this side of the Maine border, though.
You missed Riley last week.
Yeah, I really.
Or a week and a half ago.
I was telling a friend today that I wish I'd been there.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun.
Yeah, he's an excellent hunter.
He's just a good.
And he did a fantastic job as a guest on the show, Paul.
He's just a good, kind of a good all around guy.
He is for sure.
Well spirited.
Yeah,
really nice guy.
Yeah, good attitude.
Yeah. So in this episode, this is episode 24. Kind of want to talk about hunter success. In part, so we'll go over some aspects of what makes a hunter successful, and there's one key ingredient that.
Don't follow me around?
What's that?
Don't follow me around?
Yeah. Do the opposite. No, geez and girl.
Do the opposite of what I do, for sure.
No.
Yeah.
So we'll go over, what makes a hunter successful. And like I said, there's one key ingredient that we'll talk about. And everyone is pretty well known, but sometimes you forget. It's easy to get discouraged and when you're not successful.
Yeah.
And kind of it's pretty simple. There's a pretty good story that I've wanted to talk about, and we'll kind of sum up the podcast with that story.
Yeah.
And it's kind of some good insight into how sometimes what we perceive things as a disadvantage can be actually an advantage.
Yeah.
And maybe not this particular scenario directly, but in the grand scheme of things, it kind of opens your eyes to how sometimes what we view as a society as a disadvantage can actually end up being an advantage if used correctly.
Right.
And we'll get into that at the end of this. But anyway, so kind of an odd winter.
Yeah, for sure.
So far.
Yeah, we still not much snow and not much ice. In fact, I don't know if you heard, Paul, there was a vehicle went through the ice in Long Lake there.
Ryan sent me the video.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. Dan was talking about it today, and I haven't seen anything on it.
I can't imagine thinking...
No, taking a vehicle.
I'm going to drive out there.
No, we were there a week ago up to Long Lake and went to the Lakeview for New Year's Eve, and there was open water on the lake.
Yeah.
So
I had someone telling me the other day, it was probably a week ago now, a friend of theirs was fishing in closer to Sinclair, where there's opposing shores are closer to one another. And I think he said there was 4 inches of ice.
Yeah.
The guy went out, he wanted to go fishing, and he, went out and punched a hole and just walked out.
Yeah.
He wasn't hauling a bunch of stuff out there. So I can't imagine driving a truck.
No.
Out on the ice. But we went out yesterday in through the woods, drove around.
We did, yeah. And
checked some cameras, or one camera that we had out.
Very few times in January up here can you go for a ride in the woods.
Try to take advantage of it.
On an unplowed road.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it leads you to see that, there's still a lot of, larger bucks kind of going back and forth.
Yeah, the deer are a long way from the yards.
Long ways.
Yeah, they were.
Didn't see much for small deer sign, like does or fawns.
No.
Looks like they're pretty well gone to the yards. But larger deer, which kind of leads to the old adage, people say that particularly big bucks, probably the last to yard up.
Right.
If some
or
of
the
them,
least likely if the winter isn't that hard, that maybe hang back or stay away from,
yard at all. So, January 6th, we never usually get the opportunity to just drive out
very
into
seldom.
the woods. So
very seldom.
We took advantage of that opportunity and drove around and see what there was for deer sign.
Yeah.
And so far, they're having a great winter.
They are. No cold weather, Paul.
No.
I had 2 below last night, and we've had very few nights of below zero. And when it has, it's, just a few degrees below zero.
Hopefully that pays dividends next fall.
Yeah, it should.
We're about, you said regarding heating degree days, we're about halfway through.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I tried to look that up, Paul, and I couldn't find any information, but it seems to me that sometime in the middle of January, you're halfway through the heating season, but I may be wrong on that. I don't want to. I had heard one time, and I did try to find that information, but I I couldn't.
I'm not a meteorologist, but
Yeah.
then again, you don't really have to be right about anything to be a meteorologist. So.
No, they predict the weather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it predict.
Yeah.
They
Well.
say something, and
Yeah.
in Maine, whatever happens, happens.
Yeah. Yeah. We missed this storm. There's a storm right now in the southern part of the state and lower part of New England, and we're missing that one.
Yeah. And a perfect example of that is opening day deer season this year. We had almost 80 degrees.
Yeah.
And then you turn around the following day, you're out deer hunting. We had a snowstorm. Was it Monday?
Yep.
Yeah. So 2 days later.
It was Monday, Paul. So you're right. Saturday was really warm. Monday, we had 3 or 4 inches of snow.
It looks like a different world.
And Wednesday, you shot your deer.
Yeah.
On snow.
Yeah.
On that snow. Yeah.
It doesn't even look like it would be feasible.
No.
To go from
but it can change quick.
Shorts weather to tracking snow. But so as we mentioned in one of the other podcasts, so this year's harvest was just over 38,000.
Yeah.
Down from last year. And I got looking at back some previous years, looking at success rates and stuff. And 2011, it was just over 19,000.
That's when we've doubled.
That was post those 2 bad winters.
Right.
So I didn't realize it was that low.
Yeah.
In 11.
Yeah.
So we're double that.
Yeah.
So I guess what we'll do is we'll go over. So you get thinking about what contributes to hunter success, and I guess for the terms of this podcast, we're going to just say hunter success is harvesting a deer. You can get into philosophical stuff of what makes a successful season. You don't always have to shoot a deer to be successful.
No, that's for sure. Yeah.
I think if you look at younger deer hunters, there's a direct correlation between hunter satisfaction and hunter success. If you take a kid out, there's more of a connection between how satisfying their hunt was and
the success.
Success.
Harvesting
it's hard to take a 10-year-old out and spend, say, 30 days deer hunting, don't shoot anything, and be like, wow, it was a moral victory.
Yeah.
It's like, they might struggle to.
Yeah. I was thinking about that, Paul. You talk about that. And I know a lot of guys that go to places that they hunted 40 or 50 years ago, and they still go to them, and they were successful 40 or 50 years ago. But now it's rare for them to have success or harvest an animal, but they still go to them. They have camps there, and it's what they know, and it's
fond memories.
It's fond memories, what they love.
Yep.
They still, I can think of a number of hunters that still do that, and we do in a certain regard. We're still going to places that don't hold a lot of deer, but it's.
And I still check out those old places.
Yeah.
They still.
Yeah. And you think
bird hunting.
Maybe next year.
There's a deer.
Maybe next year.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had some good places that have gone downhill, and we keep thinking maybe in the years to come they'll turn around. And
actually, in some of the places, it's looking potentially so.
That's what I just said. We think maybe, it's looking better, and so we'll see.
So I get digging around, and it's funny the stuff you can find. So this is something I would have never, thought hunter success rates and stuff would be studied as far as like someone like scientists coming up with predictive models for success.
Yeah.
And it really has. And a lot of states have done it for like management reasons. You've got aging populations of deer hunters.
Yeah.
So you want to see, do success rates vary amongst various age distributions, gender, stuff like that. So they can kind of adjust how they manage their hunting seasons and their deer herds. One of the first things I came across that affects success rates is, the relationship with food sources and how prevalent food sources are that particular year.
Yeah.
There was a study in Connecticut that showed there was an inverse relationship between like acorn production and deer harvest.
Okay.
So if you had a good acorn year, the harvest rates tended to be lower.
Right.
And the theory was the deer don't have to move as far.
Right.
So they're not as mobile, not exposing themselves to not traveling as much.
Yeah, maybe too, Paul, and I, that when there's acorns, they're in the woods and they maybe not travel to the open fields or
so
whatever, right? They may not be out where the hunters are.
They're not traveling about.
Right.
And that poses a question. Well, that would probably lend a hand to people that are less likely to really put in the time and effort.
Yeah.
I think the hunters, that still work hard and get out there and know the area are going to find the deer. And those are the people that are usually successful every year, no matter what.
Yeah.
But yeah, so one thing that affects hunter success rates is food abundance.
Right.
So I guess as a general rule, you can say the more abundance of food that's available, the overall lower success rates of deer hunters. And one thing, then I was thinking about that, and I remember stories of when you were younger about beech.
Beech was a big thing back in the day.
There's a lot of beech nuts.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be, and I don't know whether it's because of the disease of the trees or the beech ridges have been cut like a lot of things,
Is it beech bark disease?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the disease is. I do know beech struggle to survive
I
now.
think if you look at their skin, it looks like acne.
Right. It's supposed to be smooth.
It is.
And it's not. None of them are.
I don't think I've ever seen smooth bark on a...
Yeah.
When I identify a beech tree, it's like that's one of the characteristics that
I can remember as in high school hunting on a ridge, and you would, when we had snow, a few inches of snow, and every beech tree was like pawed up in a perfect circle around the tree by deer, and I haven't seen that in I can everyone. You would go up on a ridge and you knew they were really hitting the beech hard and stuff. And
I see a few beech nuts every now and then, but not like, and every time I'm in around beech trees, which we have a lot.
Yeah.
I always think of, those stories of, you guys talking about beech nuts everywhere.
Yeah.
And I've never in my lifetime
have seen it like that.
No, and I've hunted for 32 years.
Yeah. And bear, we're not talking about bear harvest or anything like that, but bear for sure.
Very linked.
We're tied to the beech tree, the beech nut.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And they always produced more cubs on a good beech year.
Okay.
They were more prolific, and that was they had a lot of science on that, on the relationship between beech and bear, and there was a
Makes
tie.
sense.
I've never been a bear hunter, so
yeah, it makes sense.
But deer too. Deer were tied to the beech, and I don't see that anymore like I did.
Yeah.
Like I say, 40 years ago when I was in high school, I can remember being on beech ridges and seeing the.
Now, one thing, so acorns. You hear a lot of people, especially southern part of the state and other states, talk about the number of acorns and stuff. Northern Maine, we don't have much for oak.
No, we don't.
But there's one particular ridge.
We found a ridge.
That's
we couldn't believe it. It was right full of
and there was a
oak. Yeah.
huge harvest or a huge production of. There was acorns everywhere.
Yeah,
you can see the leaves were pawed everywhere. But that's pretty atypical in Northern Maine.
Yeah,
we don't have a lot of oak up here.
No, like I say, and I've been through that area many times and just really never noticed that. How many oak trees there were there. It was amazing. So
another key factor to hunter success, and I think this is really pertinent to Maine. Food source, I don't think is as
not up here
a factor
where we had,
in Northern Maine. That's we don't have, like I said, a lot of acorns, and the beech nuts are basically non-existent now. And
Cutting is more of a food source, the logging and stuff like that, and where we hunt.
Yeah,
in the woods.
I don't think that's a huge issue up here.
No,
definitely weather conditions, and you see that play out like this year. You'll see, and especially like social media and stuff. When we get snow, you see even the stand hunters. It just seems once we get some snow, the success rates go up big time.
Yeah. Even, Paul, my entire life, when I read outdoor columns in the paper or read articles from the department, that was always a big thing.
Yeah.
The weather always played an important role in the harvest in Maine. Snow and cold weather.
Yeah.
Snow and cold weather played a big part in our harvest.
And I think it's, kind of twofold. One, you get less deer movement in warm weather.
Yeah.
And two, warm weather, I know me as a hunter
participation.
I just don't feel like
and that is
like I
real,
find myself like that opening day that it was 80 degrees. I find myself doing a lot of like getting into an area and just kind of sitting and enjoying the scenery.
Yeah.
And you just don't feel
the effort.
logging miles and stuff.
Yeah. And that was a real thing too, Paul. And they always correlated the weather with people are more apt to stay home and not go hunting.
Yeah.
And that was when I was younger. I assume that still holds true, but they would wait for better weather.
Yeah.
So if you had a year when you didn't, you went most of the season without snow, participation may go down, and harvest went down with it.
Yeah, and especially if you like deer tracking.
Yeah.
Boys, when you get a snow on the ground, it's like you're just you don't want to be anywhere but in the deer woods. Other days you can be like, whatever. It's
But you were correct in saying even stand hunters or stalkers, it affected even the stand hunters want to see snow and stuff.
I remember
in cold weather makes the deer move. And so
I remember the guys at camp that stand hunted. They were just as excited for snow as anyone else that was going to be
absolutely
mobile.
Yeah.
And they would even say, even though I'm not, you see deer better. It just does something to your psyche. You can see what's crossed.
Yeah.
The next day you go out, you can see if anything went through during the night. There's just a whole.
Yeah.
It looks like deer hunting.
It tells you a lot. The snow does for sure.
So food sources, we've got weather. Another one that's pretty predominant is timing of the rut.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, peak of the rut in Maine, we were talking about that yesterday when we were out. You're saying what, around the 15th of November?
I think that's what generally there, and we talked about that. Probably was like two different theories. One was length of day,
length of the photo period.
Yeah, that was a theory, and then moon phases and stuff was another theory. Of course, the length of day will always be the same year in and year out.
Yep.
So the peak of the rut would be the same date. The moon phases, it would vary, but basically they fall within the same time frame.
Yeah,
they're pretty close.
So now, I guess as that applies to northern Maine, I would say if you were a stand hunter, hunting the rut is going to increase your chances by the fact that bucks are they're searching, they're mobile, they're out looking.
Yeah,
more likelihood of getting a buck to cross in front of you, as opposed to early in the year, bucks aren't moving that hard.
Yeah.
Now, if you're someone who likes a deer track, obviously any day you get snow is good. But if you get snow early in the year, I mean that ups your chances big time.
It does,
because they're not moving very far,
right?
And they're much easier to catch.
Mm-hmm.
When you get into the later part of the season, you get tracking a buck that's kind of in seek and destroy mode.
Yeah.
Man, they can get psychotic almost.
Yeah, you can go a long way and not catch up with them later in the year when they're traveling.
Yeah.
And another thing with that too, Paul, and I can remember, and I'm there again, I'm assuming it's probably similar to that now. The third week was a week when a lot of serious deer hunters took their vacation. They always went for the week before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Because they always felt that was the kind of the peak of the rut.
Yep.
The third week was always a big deal with a lot of hunters.
Yeah.
That were serious deer hunters, and they had 1 week to take off. That was the week that they would take off, that third week. So.
And we like the fourth week, more or
better
less
chance of snow.
Better chance of snow.
Yeah.
And so later.
Yeah, obviously, the later you go into November, doesn't always obviously hold true, but that was the it stands to reason, the logic.
So one thing you do find with the rut is the further north you go, the rut tends to be shorter and more intense.
Mm-hmm.
As you get to southern states, it can be more drawn out.
Yeah.
So you look at basically places that have intense winters.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they're, boom, getting it done and over with before inclement weather comes. And you read some states, southern states, it can last quite a while. Rut's less intense, but longer duration. So one thing that, when I was looking up stuff regarding, the rut and hunter success and stuff, Maine has an interesting program. It's part of what they call their SPY project, and I had no idea about this. It's on the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife's website. Yeah, so they have what's called the Rut Watch. And so if someone's out deer hunting in the fall time and they observe any characteristics of rutting activity, they can report it on the website, on this database, and what they saw for activity. And basically it'll give, they give the time that they saw the activity, the date, what they saw. There's categories that they have for rutting activity. And it's a method at which the state can help try to hone in on basically when peak rut is. Mm-hmm. Because I guess the way they used to do it was, and they probably still do, is it was basically analysis of pregnant does. Yeah. So if a doe gets hit by a car, they would look at the fetus and kind of work backwards to predict when conception was. Yeah. But not a lot of numbers of pregnant does that they would have to analyze. Right. So this kind of opened up the realm of, hunters and outdoors, men and women can report what they saw for activity, and then they can utilize that to kind of study when peak rut is in the state. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So another one that I'd come across was, or I guess I was thinking about, was I found this in one of the places that we hunt. Is a lot of the deer avoid roads. Yeah. Big time.
Human activity. They associate roads with human activity, and which stands to reason. I mean,
there's some places that it can be relatively easy to pick up a buck track from the road. Yeah. But I've found, one of the areas that we hunt in particular, boys, I've picked up a lot of buck tracks just by, we've been driving down the road. Yeah. And see on the bank where a deer had walked down.
But he didn't go across the road. Yeah.
But didn't cross the road. And you just happen to catch, 20 yards, 30 yards up on the bank, some punch marks. Yeah. And you get out and you're like, he came down to the road, but turned around, hightailed right out of there. Yeah. And tracking deer, I don't know how many deer that I've tracked in that particular area. They come up to the road, will parallel the road, but they'll find a spot to get across that road maybe it dead ends. Right. Or it's a worse section of the road, hard to travel. And they amaze me at how they find areas to navigate through these places and get on the other side of the road without actually crossing a part of the road you could drive. Right. But hands down, so we're looking at hunter success. What's the biggest predictor of hunter success? And we were talking, it's kind of a no-brainer when you think about it, but it boils down to time spent. Yep. And this was all the studies that were using predictive models or models to predict hunter success were hands down, time spent is your key factor to success. Right. Age, experience, those had very little influence as opposed to time spent. Yeah. So boots on the ground, getting out and showing up every day.
I would agree with that. That would make perfect sense, Paul. And most of your successful, or let's say good deer hunters, they have that mentality that they're gonna stay out there. They're gonna hunt every opportunity, and you see it a lot. I watch a lot of podcasts and hunting shows in the Northeast, and these young guys they spend a lot of time. I don't know what they do for work. Yeah. They spend a lot of time in the woods. Yeah. And they're mobile. Yeah. They may be in the Adirondacks one week and in Maine the next. And they're doing Mass in December, and New Hampshire, Vermont, and they spend a lot of time hunting.
So Yeah, so I came across a study. It was published in 2022 in October. And it was a study in Oregon, like the northeast corner of Oregon. And they looked at rifle hunting for deer, rifle hunting for elk, and then bow hunting for, I believe, elk, but they ended up excluding the bow hunting for elk because they didn't get a lot of numbers as far as people bow hunting for elk. And they were trying to find the biggest predictors of hunter success. So they're thinking, age, the older you are, the more experience you have.
Yeah, the better hunter you might be.
They're thinking that's going to influence hunter success. They really thought, like the use of ATVs and stuff like that, being able to get out on those probably had a positive impact on hunter success. But when it all boiled down, when the numbers were in, it was time.
Yeah.
Everything else was basically a wash.
Yeah.
And it was time spent was the big equalizer.
I could see where that would be we tried to do that, Paul.
That's right.
We tried to do that, although it hasn't worked out for me this year, or last year. But, I have the mentality that if I put enough time in, an opportunity will come up. So,
and it's like, I always like the analogy that Hal Blood uses, 2 points connecting.
Yeah.
Because, that's basically what it boils down to.
That's what time does.
The
more time, the greater your odds of those 2 points connecting.
So you're talking about odds. They actually had some concrete numbers regarding how it increases your odds.
Yeah.
So the ultimate results were, successful hunters spent more hours outside of camp.
Mm-hmm.
And they found that there was a slight increase in success rates to those that were actually out on foot.
Mm-hmm.
It was marginal. Wasn't anything like just time spent. But for rifle hunting for deer, they said for each additional hour spent, the odds of success were increased by 26%.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty big. So if you spend morning until night out in the woods every day, doesn't matter how good you are or how good you think you are, you can basically level the playing field.
Yeah. I agree, but you never want to throw away the other things too, Paul, that, there are, like you say, they're of less importance, but they're still, a good eyesight.
Yep.
That's important. Good hearing.
Yep.
Can play, and they may only play a fraction, but you want all the odds in your favor.
Right. You're right.
So anybody can spend a lot of time.
Yep.
Well, I shouldn't say anybody that has the time, but there's some things that, quick reactions being a good shot.
Yeah.
Like we talk about Lanny Benoit. Okay, he sees a deer that I may not even be able to pull a rifle up on, and he's making a shot and killing the deer, and and he can do it consistently, and those are smaller factors, but they all play a part in it. How well you see, how well you hear, your
physical
reaction, your physical ability to make a difficult shot. Hal Blood can do it.
Yeah,
Hal Blood can make so
experience.
Yeah, those are
so here's
where you go, making good choices where you go. So you're going to spend time in the woods, but you want to spend time you want to invest that time in the best possible place that they up your odds again. And so that is important. Yeah, and maybe the mode, your way of hunting, may add a little bit in your favor. So
I would say the caveat to that is, this particular study that was using this predictive model is just looking at, time spent. But I think where those other ones fall into is those hunters that have more experience, know what's going on, have all the great physical attributes that are required, are going to shorten up the time spent to be successful.
Right.
So they're not going to have to spend as much time because they're going to be much more efficient at doing what they're doing.
Yeah. But time is, I would agree, Paul, that time is, if you
you just put yourself out there.
You just want, right. Yeah.
So you think of people that say, it's easy to get discouraged, and I was talking to one of the guys at work about it, and, he'd hunted all season and he ended up being successful. But he literally has to have talks with himself because it's like, it just takes a second for it to happen. And it's easy to be like, boys, I have spent so much time and haven't.
So I watched a video that came out last night, Northeast Whitetails, and they had a very good hunter on there. And he had spent 7 days, I think it was Vermont, without seeing a deer. And he was discouraged.
That can
And he was a good hunter.
take
and
the wind
hunted
out of
hard.
your sails, for sure.
He was a good hunter and hunted hard. And the 8th day, he went out and he saw one deer.
You shoot it?
And he killed the deer.
Yeah.
And he said he was discouraged.
Yep.
And this guy is not. He's been around the block. I mean, he knows that being successful doesn't always fall in your lap, and there's going to be stretches where you have to really grind and work for it and stuff. But he admitted that he was discouraged and stuff. Hadn't seen a deer in 7 days of hunting, and but that 8th day he killed a nice buck.
Yeah.
So.
And you see, that's where hunter satisfaction and success can kind of be closely correlated when someone's younger or new to the sport and you're trying to get them involved. It's hard to get someone new. If you're experienced and you've done it a lot, you know what to expect.
Exactly.
Especially in some of these areas. But if you're trying to introduce someone new, especially a kid, it can be very hard to, when a new hunter you see when they harvest their first animal, that's usually the thing that gets them hooked. Yeah. Like they're addicted at that point. Yeah. But man, if it takes, 7 days of not seeing a deer. Right. Holy smokes.
And we have a history of maybe shooting 20 or 30 deer in our past that were out in the woods, and that's with us all the time. So that helps you stay out there because you've had a history of success in the past, so and even if you don't get one, you still have that. Yeah. And you enjoy being out there because of it, and you reminisce about the times you were successful in the deer you shot, and you can enjoy just being out there.
And I was thinking, as I was working out today, I was thinking about my most enjoyable parts of deer hunting. There's two things that I love the most, and it actually isn't harvesting the deer. It's the trip to deer camp, that anticipation, like when you're leaving the house to go, getting everything ready.
There again, that's a history.
Yeah.
That's related to the history, to your memory.
And then the process of getting the deer out. Yeah. And kind of the celebration and the enjoyment of after the deer's down. Those are probably my two favorite things. And for a new hunter or a young hunter who doesn't have
they don't have that
memories of that stuff to draw from. Right. They're highly
their mind
blamed.
is blank. Their mind, like you say, they haven't built that. We've built that. We have something built in us, but they don't have it built in them. And no. And it's easy to say, you know what, it's not worth it, or the odds of success, the effort's not worth the so.
So I think, a lot of these states try to use some of these predictive models because they want hunter recruitment. Right. And they want people to be successful because that'll kind of, that's a positive memory right off the bat. Yeah. And then, like you said, what it feels like when it happens. Yeah. Then you're more apt to go those days without.
Tough it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing going on.
Grind it out.
But you know what it feels like. You know what it's like to get a deer on the ground and get it back home. Yeah. And hands down, time spent.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
That's your magic ingredient right there.
Yeah, yeah.
And you don't have to be very good.
No, like I say, but
diligent.
There again, Paul, most of your good hunters are going to be the ones that are going to be in it to win it. They're gonna know that it may not happen in the first 7 days, but I'm going the 8th. And I'm going the 20th. If I got to go 20 days, I'm going to go 20 days to, and
how many good deer hunters do you see shoot deer like on the last day?
A lot.
It's common.
Yeah, a lot.
Like right down to the hour.
Yeah.
It's like, geez, I'm crow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Makes you wonder, are they doing it on purpose or? Yeah. But you get a lot of people last day. that are good deer hunters.
Yeah, and some of them, and it doesn't play a big factor in the way we hunt, Paul, but a lot of these good deer hunters that I listen to, they spend a lot of time before the season.
Yeah, and that was, I failed to mention that.
Yeah, so they spend a lot of time in the woods, and in fact, they may spend more time in the woods in the off season than they do actually hunting.
Yeah.
And it plays a factor in, you know, their success.
It does. I left this out, and I'm trying to recall the number because it wasn't to rifle hunting for deer. It was regarding elk hunting, and I didn't know if that was fully relatable to whitetail deer hunting. But scouting for the guys that scouted that were elk hunters, I believe it increased their success rate by like 400%.
Oh yeah,
it was insane.
Yeah,
how scouting played a role in their success. I don't know if up here,
right?
You know that scouting is that deer numbers are so low.
Yeah,
and so much goes on during.
Maybe not to the same extent, but I would believe that scouting would, you know, it would up our odds of success if. And I know a lot of hunters that are successful that do a lot of scouting, and I'm sure it plays a big part in their success. So.
Just getting out in the woods and getting acclimated in that fall time is, I think, a game changer. Because the whole different attributes of senses you use from our everyday life,
right,
to when you're deer hunting,
right.
You know, we're hustle bustle, a lot of stimulating sounds and noises, and a lot of stuff vying for our attention. Versus when you're out in the quiet woods, it can kind of
you got to be observant.
Take a day or two.
You got to be really observant, both hearing
down.
and visual. You have to be observant, and that really, really helps. And patient.
Yeah,
patience is a good thing.
Yeah,
and
So while we're talking about senses, I guess we'll go into. So we had John Carroll on the podcast a while back, and John had sent me a story of, and I think we talked about it briefly on one of the podcasts. There was a young group of guys that went to their camp after John was there.
Yeah.
And one of the guys, his name is John as well, young guy, John Phelps, he's hearing impaired and shot a beautiful buck. And I guess it kind of struck a chord with me, because I rely on my hearing a lot. I don't have the greatest eyesight.
So you're imagining going through the woods not being able to hear.
How
would you?
Boys, that's a tough. And one thing about stuff like that is how adaptable the body is.
Yeah.
Our other senses can really
take over.
I mean, just look at someone who's blind.
Yeah.
Reading Braille. I don't know if you've ever gone to an elevator, inside an elevator.
Yeah. Try to feel that.
You feel that. And I mean, I'll close my eyes and touch it and be like, how the heck can someone read with their touch? You know, just touching some raised dots.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how your other senses can be honed.
Yeah.
In missing some.
Yeah. So
it kind of struck a chord. So John had sent me the story. I'll pull it up. Sent me the story of John Phelps' buck. And it sounds like it really got him hooked to deer hunting.
Yeah.
That really, so that he was excited about going to deer camp.
Yeah.
And then he shot, it was 206 pounds.
Yeah.
And shot a deer.
Was this his first year at deer camp? This gentleman?
I'll have to ask John. I'll read the story because this is going to be, so the young man who can't hear, this is his words that he'd sent to John. And you could just hear the excitement. And so it sounds like these guys are hooked, big time on. So there's kind of that link between, you know, hunter satisfaction and success.
Yeah, and
it kind of worked out good. So I'll just read what John's words were specifically. So he's like, so I went up to northern Maine with my best friend and his family friends. It's a yearly tradition. We're hunting for a few days, so there was no snow to start to track deer. So finally, in a few days, we got plenty of snow. We found a fresh buck track. So they all get out and started tracking it. We bumped 2 deer, which was a good sign, but we didn't get either one. So they went back to the truck that day for lunch, and they made up a game plan, and then headed back out that afternoon. Said he goes into the woods, he made some doe calls. A few minutes later, saw a beautiful buck standing about 300 yards away in a clear cut, and he missed it.
Yeah.
So he's bummed and disappointed with himself. So he gets back to camp, and one of his buddies there, it sounds like, said, hey, shooter's going to shoot. Yeah, you got to shoot.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not going to get him if you don't shoot.
Right.
And so the next day, like so you can see the highs and lows of deer hunting.
Right.
You miss a nice buck.
Yeah.
And
opportunities don't come around very often. So I've been there.
Few and far
and
between.
You blow a chance or miss a chance, and you're thinking, that's probably going to be my only chance. So
easy to throw in the towel.
Yeah.
So they went back to the same spot where they missed the buck. They saw 2 new fresh buck tracks. Okay, so they decided to separate, and each one, so there was 2 of them now at this point, and each one picked up the buck track. And so he says, I was really excited. I had a lot of adrenaline flowing. And so he said he walked about a mile, maybe a mile and a half or so up a hill, and he ended up jumping the deer 4 times and never saw him. But he knew the deer was in front of him all day long. So he goes, I was getting frustrated. I was really sweaty since I've been going for so long. He goes, I decided to take a break for 5 or 10 minutes after I saw that he crossed an old road. So he goes, in my head, I'm questioning if I should keep going or move on faster or move on to fresher tracks. He goes, but I didn't give up. I decided to go on the same track. But before I went back into the woods, I gave some doe calls. He goes, I started to go in, went like 60 to 80 yards, and the buck literally turned around and walked right in front of him within 30 yards.
Oh.
And he goes, before I took the shot, I said, not today. He goes, I didn't want to miss again. So he took the shot and he dropped him. And he said he was very calm when he took the shot, but after everything was all done, he said the adrenaline kicked in like crazy.
Yeah.
He goes, I had some bad buck fever at that point. He goes, I couldn't even stand still. He goes, I couldn't have been happier knowing I'd shot a nice buck. And he goes, ended up being 206-pound 9-pointer. Would have been a 10, but one tine was broken off. And he goes, it always feels good to prove that I can do these things, even though I'm hard of hearing. So it's always a challenge for me to hunt and not be able to hear what other people are hearing. I can't hear the deer in the woods, so I rely on, tracks in the snow and always trying to figure out how to make it work. He goes, I felt accomplished and proud and proved them wrong that I can hunt in the northern Maine woods. He says the North Maine woods is such a beautiful place to experience. We see so much beautiful wildlife and get to experience so much in the woods and at camp with great friends and family. And of course, nothing beats the food at camp as well. He's really looking forward to next year being able to prove that he's not letting his hearing get in the way of getting another big buck in the northern Maine woods.
I was thinking of that, Paul, that gentleman, and congratulations to him, but he will think about that every day.
Oh my God.
With anticipation for this year.
Yeah.
For going. That changes your perspective, and it enhances it so much that, like I say, he'll be chomping at the bit every day to get back up there.
Yeah.
And it'll take on a whole different meaning. Deer camp will.
So there are a lot of things that struck a chord. He was determined not to let a challenge like that prevent him from being successful.
Yeah.
And immediately when I read the story, I'd read a book years ago by Malcolm Gladwell. And I'm a big fan of Malcolm Gladwell books. He kind of has books on they kind of make you think about things in an unconventional manner. Like some of my favorite ones are Tipping Point. But he wrote a book called David and Goliath, and I got the book in front of me. And it was funny. So he lays out in this book these challenges as a society that we view as a disadvantage can end up actually being an advantage for some people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And not that this particular scenario, that John Phelps had an advantage because he couldn't hear, but definitely there are things that we may view as a disadvantage that end up honing other skills.
Determination.
That we never, you're right, that we never would have honed otherwise. And so the minute I read that story that John Carroll sent me of John Phelps, I thought of a story in David and Goliath, and it's right full of all these different scenarios, but one in particular was a guy that had dyslexia. We would say that's a disadvantage, right? You can't read like a normal person can. You can't read as fast, can't read efficiently. Spelling's an issue. So yeah, there was a guy there's a guy he featured in the book who had dyslexia, and obviously the guy struggled in school. Came from a small community, a farming community, and didn't really learn to read until the 3rd grade. But what he did is, to get himself through, he developed an ability to listen to someone and commit it to memory right away without ever having to read.
Right.
Without even knowing he was doing it. But he wanted to get through school and proceed that way. So his mother would read him books or read to him or say something to him. And he got
memorized.
Very good at being very efficient at what someone was saying.
Right.
And committing it to memory. Couldn't read efficiently. So he did terrible in high school. And when he got out, I believe he was married. They had a kid, him and his wife. And he was working construction. And she wanted him to go to college. Like, you need to make something of yourself. You need to go to college. You need to do something. She was really trying to push him along. And he always had an interest in law. So he said, well, maybe I'll go to law school. But he had to go to do his undergraduate first. So knowing what I can't read very good. So all of his core classes, he avoided all core classes that had like intensive reading in them.
Right.
Then he realized that to go to law school, he didn't actually have to complete his degree. He just had to have certain classes completed.
Yeah.
Well, law is very intent on reading, right? You got to read a lot.
Absolutely.
And that was where he developed this, really honed his ability. He would sit in class, and while everyone was taking notes, he would make sure he just listened to everything and committed it to memory.
Yeah.
So he ended up doing really well, and he ended up the law school. I think he was in Northeastern Law School. I'd have to check which law school he finally
maybe
got
Northwestern.
Into. I forget.
I think Northwestern was a big law school, but it could have been Northeastern.
Well, no, he ended up going to Yale, transferring into Yale. So he ended up doing well enough.
That's in the Northeast. So.
That he ended up going to Yale Law School. And what he ended up doing, he became one of the best trial lawyers ever. Because now here's an example of, so he couldn't do corporate law, a lot of reading, going through documents, stuff like that. But because he listened well and all the little nuances in someone's voice and could commit it all to memory, there was a long trial going on and he would go to cross-examine someone.
He was a master.
He would catch people in all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So he became an excellent trial lawyer.
Yeah.
So, that's an example of Malcolm Gladwell kind of laying out how we would, as a whole, say if you're dyslexic,
it's a disadvantage.
It's a disadvantage.
Yeah.
But in this particular scenario, it was what made him develop that skill of being like a phenomenal listener and being able to memorize what he heard. And there's a plethora of examples in that book where we would automatically assume, that's a challenge. It's hard to overcome.
Right.
But it actually...
Yeah. And that plays out in all phases of society, Paul. You read about that in the business world.
Oh, yeah.
Kids coming from disadvantaged homes and working harder and athletes, a lot of times they weren't the best at, the most talented or gifted athletes that become the best at their sport. They work harder than the next guy or find out what they're really good at, what they can, and that, like I say, in all aspects of our society, that happens.
So it's really how you respond to a challenge. Yeah. That's the big
determination has,
So it doesn't matter if your challenge is a disability or not privileged to maybe have access to the best school.
That's exactly right.
Or financial issues, or you come from an area of oppression or something like that. But it's how you respond to that challenge that really can separate you from the others.
Yeah.
And so I got the book here.
Yeah.
It's David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell. I think I've read all of Malcolm's books, and he's got a lot of good books. And so when I was reading that story, I was like, God, where's that Malcolm Gladwell book? Because I've got to read quite a bit, have a lot of books.
Yeah.
And I keep all my books. I don't put them in totes, and you never know when I want to reference them. And I'm like, I probably can't find this book. It's been a long time since I read it. And I happened to look over my shelf, and it was the first book I laid eyes on.
Yeah.
So, yeah. John Phelps' story was pretty cool. You know, it really struck a chord with me.
Anything is possible, Paul, if you know, it's just a matter of the person being determined and setting his mind to something. You know, you can do almost anything that, like Riley last, he's a determined guy.
Yes.
You know, so.
Yeah. You get a mindset like that, like there ain't no challenge is going to get in your way too big to stop.
And almost look forward to it sometimes. Look forward to a challenge.
And I've always told people that, you know, there's a solution to every problem.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't come up with a solution, someone else will.
Yeah.
So figure it out.
Yeah.
Because there's always a way to get something done. Yeah. But yeah, that was a really good story. And it's kind of, you know, young guys getting caught up in the traditions of deer hunting. And it was a big buck to boot. They did it tracking. Yeah. You imagine not being able to hear and track. Well, you can now.
But, I'm pretty close to that right now. My hearing is going south. So, yeah.
So I guess, to summarize this, I mean, your biggest route to success is time spent, and don't get discouraged. Don't let any challenges get in the way.
Nope. That's good advice.
Yeah. Oh, not to change the subject too much, but you were down in Boston, or you were down in Massachusetts, excuse me.
Yeah.
So I told Brittany, who's my sister, we're going to have Deer Camp 2.0 down there next year.
Yeah, while I was there, so I spent a lot of time in the woods up here. And while I was there, and I don't know if you can put a photo of it, Paul, if you've got the photo or if you wanted to.
I get some video of it.
Yeah, so right in the middle of the day, we're all sitting in the kitchen, and right outside the window, there's a beautiful 8-point buck.
Yeah.
They just eating their vegetation, eating their flowers in the flower bed and stuff. And so.
They just bought a house in Mass.
Yeah.
Moving back to the East Coast.
Yeah, I think there was 4 or 5 deer there, but one beautiful buck.
She says she's close to some national forest or state forest or something like that. So probably look into that. So I basically invited us down, said we're going to have Deer Camp 2.0 at your place.
Down in Mass. Yeah, well, they're not far from New Hampshire either. I don't know what part of New Hampshire, you know, if there's good deer hunting in that. But I know they're, because we actually just went for a short ride and had supper in New Hampshire while we were there. Yeah.
She's working in New Hampshire.
In Hampton. She is, she's not.
No?
She's working in Amesbury, Mass.
Oh, okay. All right.
But they thought about, when she knew she was working in Amesbury, she thought about living in New Hampshire because it's not far from.
Okay. Maybe that's what I was thinking.
It isn't far from New Hampshire.
All right.
So.
Well, awesome.
Yeah.
There, I guess. I don't know what we got planned for. I'd like to go ice fishing sometime, but I'm still not.
Yeah, we get an invite. I was telling you before the podcast, we get an invite to go. We just have to nail down a time with a friend of mine.
Make sure that there's ice.
Yeah, there'll be ice when we go. It's been making ice the last few nights. It's been cold, so there'll be ice. There always is.
Yep.
So eventually.
So anyway, I guess that just about sums it up.
Yeah.
So until next time, get outside.
It's good for the soul.
See ya.